Hello and welcome to the Gold, Ghosts, and Guns Market Report for today, the 2nd of July, 2025. My name is Tom Luongo. We have a lot to talk about. To remind, tomorrow we leave for our vacation in the Appalachians and a visit to our property up in Tennessee, where we have to do a little bit of work to get that project moving forward. And so I am hoping that I will be able to keep the normal schedule, especially considering everything that's going on. I don't know. It all depends on the driving schedule and everything else. We might miss a market report over the next 14 days. And if we do, we do. I won't stress about it, but I will. And I will do everything I can to show up and do the thing. And even if I don't do a market report, well, the ability to sit down and do, an audio ruminations or something along those lines will happen, of course, because, I can't stay away from this stuff for 2 weeks. I can't take 2 weeks off. So, and then of course the goal is to start getting ahead on next month's newsletter or this month's newsletter. So, that being said, before I get to the regular commentary for the morning, and we have a lot of it to go over, a little housekeeping. I have noticed, and I know this is going to go over like a lead balloon with some people, but I have noticed a sincere uptick in, I guess it would be called negative feedback. And, that's fine. I welcome honest, constructive feedback from people. When you think I'm going off course, I need to know. When you think I'm doing things wrong, I need to know. But I mean it to be constructive, honest feedback. I'm seeing commentary from people who should know better that is clearly more of a mirror of their mental state than it is of mine. Okay. And I mean that because I know that because you can tell when people start arguing about opinions. Opinions are opinions. Everybody has one. It's like everybody has an asshole. Opinions are fine. Opinions are exactly what they are. They're opinions. They are not an argument. And I ran into this yesterday, and I find it troubling. This is where I got into trouble with Alex the last time we were on Sean Newman together. Alex and I have a difference of opinion about Iran's motivations. And therefore, we got into it defending our positions. He stated his position, I stated mine, and then Alex tried to browbeat me on my opinion about what's the greater threat here. And I'm like, this is not an argument. This is an opinion. You can choose to ignore it, and you can choose to disagree with it. And if you respect me, you will disagree with it. And it's the same thing, because I don't agree with Alex's position on Iran's motivations, but yet I respected it enough to incorporate it, work with it, and attempt to, put it into context. And I hope that everybody here does that. And I'm telling you right now, I see you people. I know who the agitators are. And it's very frustrating to watch good people be gaslit by agent provocateurs who are clearly in the room. We've had a situation on the Slack server where a bunch of malcontents went off and created a splinter group a few weeks ago, attempting to drive everybody out of the room and destroy and take everybody with them. That's fine. And the funny part about it is that they thought I would be upset about this. I've been trying to get some of these people to leave the server for months, but I like taking money from people who hate me. It's actually part of Dexter and my strategy is to, attract people who hate us and pay us for it. If you don't understand that, You know, if you don't understand that, we learned the lessons of Rush Limbaugh really well, I don't know what to tell you. But if you're unhappy here, it's the beginning of the month. Life is too short to hang out with people you hate. But hey, if you want to pay either $4 or $12 a month in order to hang out with people you hate, be my guest. But you will not be allowed to agitate and try to poison the well. That you will not be able to do. And if you do so, you will be removed from the garden. Because that's the way it works. Because I have the only hoe. Like it or not. I understand that everybody's emotions are running high. Mine have at times, and I've been doing everything I can to keep my emotions under control. It's very difficult. You all know how I operate. I appreciate the constructive comments and or messages behind the scenes from people, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. I obviously in DM or in comments, public comments, worrying about my health, my sanity, my safety. I get it. Have you considered this, Tom? Have you considered that, Tom? Yes, I have. And the answer to all those questions is I'm fine. I sleep pretty well at night, though I did have a real bad night the other night. This isn't my first rodeo. I've been dealing with trolls on the internet since 1987. For anybody here who's a little confused about that. There's this thing called Usenet. If you've not heard of it, believe me, folks, nothing that the CIA, GCHQ, or the Mossad can do beats hanging out on like alt-cesium. Trust me on this one, okay? Or alt-pave the world, or whatever. For the old internet hacks in the audience, you know what I'm talking about. So, but I have thought all of these things through. And my position is very clear now. Iran never gained a nuclear weapon because they never wanted to gain a nuclear weapon, but not for the reasons that Alex and everybody else have been talking about, the fatwa, the this, the that. I mean, I'm arguing, no, it has nothing to do with that at all. It's clear that these guys are in bed with friggin' GCHQ on both sides. That it's the search for the nuclear weapon. It's the striving for it. That's the casus belli, not the actual nuclear weapon. If they wanted to make a nuclear weapon, they would have done so 20 years ago. Because, hell, fucking North Korea made one. And if the Russians wanted them to have a nuclear weapon, they would have had one. If the Chinese wanted them to have a nuclear weapon, they would have had one. My logic here is not wrong. My logic here just comes to a different conclusion than your logic. And we're going to find out whose logic is correct. And there's no amount of browbeating me into submission on this. Because at the end of the day, I understand the strategy of bitches like Christine Lagarde and Andrew Bailey and all the rest of them. And Tony Blair and Benjamin Netanyahu. The goal is chaos. Of course they want regime change in Iran. Of course it's playing out like a certain friggin' script. And notice how Trump is not doing anything about this. I made the point the other day. I will make it again. Trump controls Israeli politics now. The British are trying to, resurrect Reza Pahlavi. It's not working. The Russians are going after the NGOs in all of the stands. They're arresting people. Aliyev in Azerbaijan is trying to prop up his failing regime. He's been caught with his hand in the cookie jar, helping Israel attack Iran from the north and betray Russia at the same time. He knows he's in trouble. After all of the drama on the Slack server over the last couple of days, I think it's really funny that everybody thought I would be upset about this. Don't tell Tom. Hey, let's come to our new group, and don't tell Tom. Like, don't give a shit. Like, I'm happy you all found your soulmates being Juicebergs together. It's grand. I always want people to find their niche in the world. And if you're not part of my niche, great. Because I don't want you to be in that. I don't want you to be in this club. I've said it 1,000 times. But if you still want to pay for access to find out what I'm talking about, go right ahead and do so. Best of both worlds, as far as I'm concerned. You're off in the corner being anti-Semites and shitbags together while I get paid. I'm having a hard time seeing the downside here. So it's not tough, folks. This is my position because I'm trying to end this nightmare. We have been blackmailed by these evil freaking people for 85 years on this shit. 80 years since the end of World War II. The Cold War redux, the Russia, the lost 90s in Russia, all of it. It's all downstream of this. When you stop to really do the math about how much money is spent trying to deal with minimizing the threat of nuclear weapon proliferation, and the amount of money that's spent on defense and espionage and this and cloak and dagger stuff and all of it, the congressional hearings and the lost wages and all of it, on everybody, the SG&A costs on every corporation in the fucking world. It's trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars every fucking year. And who does that serve? Level up and see through the bullshit. The way to end all this is to start cleaving Gordian knots. Your move, or you get a B-2 up your ass. Your move, we fly in some F-22s. Your move. If you want to know why I have anger in my voice, I'm disappointed in Iran. They turned out to be bluffing the entire time. Maybe I'm going to be wrong about that. But as of right now, the facts on the ground state pretty clearly that Iran was a paper tiger. That's what we have. And I've been pretty clear. I don't like Israel. I'm trying not to use the word hate because I don't want hate to be the operative means by which I do analysis, because that's a bad way to do analysis. Because, you know, that whole anger, fear, aggression, that the path leads to the dark side, like, it's real, folks. Hate makes you powerful. Like, yeah, I'm just not playing that game. So I want Israel to pay for their crimes, all of them, including the ones where they got us involved in shit that poured moral stain all over me because I wound up paying for it. I'm angry about that. I really wanted Iran to really knock their freaking teeth in. Really did. A little angry about that. A little sad. Sad that I actually was sucked into that bullshit for a few years. That being said, they hit them hard enough and hit us hard enough because of the perilous state our actual military supply lines are in and our ammunition supply lines are in, which has a nugget of truth to it, which is not untrue, that we can't sustain that war for that long. But we can sustain it long enough to get rid of the assholes who are fighting the good fight of the resistance. I mean, I love Star Wars, but it's a bad metaphor for this. We're not the Empire. They're not the rebellion or the resistance. That's not the way this works. Okay? It's not the way it works. So let all that go. And let's move forward and say, you know what? I don't want to be blackmailed by evil fucking shitbags anymore. You guys want to fight amongst yourselves for resources? You want to tax us for militaries and all that? Great. You've developed weapons now where you only have to fight each other. We're back to the wars are fought by the king's armies. And only the king's armies need to be targeted. And the civilians can be left alone. You know, gentlemanly warfare. Lob ballistic missiles and drones at each other's ammo dumps and weapons development sites and research departments and skunk works and all the rest of it. And their barracks. You sign up for the military, your life is forfeit. My dad was NYPD. I never once was under any illusions about the fact that my dad had to put himself in harm's way in order to protect and serve. And I found it offensive the older I got here in the United, as time went along, that we sat here protecting cops. Fuck protecting cops. Cops' lives are forfeit in service of protecting and serving civilians. If you've read this month's newsletter, I think you understand my perspective on this. If you haven't read this month's newsletter, well, maybe consider spending an extra $7 this month on it. $8, whatever it is. I've just come into a different state of mind about all of these things. Watching this play itself out brought a lot of clarity. I'm tired of watching the Vorlons and the Shadows manipulate us into fighting their fucking wars for them. I want a new way. Even for people like us. If you were part of last night's Twitter space I did with Joe Matzley of Stargate and Dark Matter fame, you'll know that I quoted the end of Babylon 5 last night as to why it's so damned important. And that final line by Ivanova, that it taught us that there's still hope in this world, even for people like us. These people changed the world. They ushered in an entire new age, all flawed, and you couldn't have done it, any of it, without the people who fell into darkness and the people who were tempted by hubris, motivated by anger. No one remained pure. Everybody failed. Everybody fell. And some rose. It's a beautiful story. So we reach these inflection points in history. They are mirrored in our communities. because human interactions are fractal. This is the family system dynamic being played out on the geopolitical stage. And if you want to be stuck down in the muck, arguing about who's right and who's wrong and who started it and who didn't and blah, 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 and you think that's actually important, you're lost in the gaslighting. It's like watching the libertarians today think that Donald Trump isn't going to primary Thomas Massie in Kentucky. He's going to primary Thomas Massie. Okay? That's reality. And every once in a while, we get lost in our own solipsism. We get lost in our own thing. And I'm not saying I don't. But I'm moving on from that version of me. I'm moving on from that version. And Dexter and I both believe that we should move on from that version of Gold, Goats, and Guns. Gold, Goats, and Guns is, we know what it's about. We always have. It's not changed. Nothing has changed. Our job, read the tea leaves as best we can, provide you with the best information that we can, take positions that may be even playing devil's advocate. And yeah, every once in a while, double down on being the guy in the middle. So let's talk about Trump and Powell. Let's talk about where we are there. And then I'm going to talk about the big, beautiful bill and how it's passed the Senate and how all the gaslighting about it is all bullshit as well. Okay, let's get started with that. Yesterday, Jerome Powell was at the ECB at a forum with Lagarde of the ECB, Ueda of the BOJ, Andrew Bailey of the BOE, and the guy who runs the Bank of South Korea, whose name I don't know, Yi or Ri or whatever. Doesn't matter. I can't understand. I still don't understand why the South Korean guy was even there. I mean, would they have been better served having, the head of the Bank of Canada there? Because he's, at this point, more important. Notice how the Swiss National Bank or the Bundesbank weren't there. I urge everybody to watch it. I posted a link on my Slack server yesterday and #money, but you can find it it's all over the place on YouTube. You should just watch the interactions between Powell and Lagarde and Bailey. The other two guys do not matter. They are clearly Asian subordinates. The last 10 minutes are all that really matters. There's about 3 or 4 moments that matter, but I need you to, if you're confused about the situation between Trump and Powell, there's 2 things I'm going to tell you. 1, don't be. Powell is going to continue to do what he wants to do. He's got a non-farm payroll number this morning that's going to allow him to cut rates because it came in really bad. Expectations of 99,000 new jobs, and we lost 33,000 jobs. So now he's got cover for the labor market. Gasoline prices are pretty low. Oil's below $70 a barrel. They can't gin Iran and Israel back up into another conflict. And trust me on this one, either side can restart this conflict. Most likely will be the Israelis. 75-25, it's the Israelis. But Powell was asked about effectively about his independence. And then, with the implication about Trump. And he basically reiterated what he always says. Look, the feds, we have a mandate from Congress, blah, 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 politic. And Lagarde starts to clap. Like, oh, see, central banks are independent. Fuck you, Donald Trump. And then the whole crowd at the ECB then brings it. That was a Lagarde struggle session to try and butter up Jerome Powell. It was hilarious and sad and pathetic. There was another moment as well that was also quite hilarious. Powell was in charge of the entire thing. And then they were asked about stable coins. This is where I'm going to go. This is where this leads into talking point number 3 this morning. The AP, the interviewer starts with Andrew Bailey over at the BOE. Who, by the way, is a disrespectful and slovenly piece of British shit. Oh my God. Can't sit up, can't address the crowd, looks at the floor. He's not even like Aspie. He's just like, oh my God, why am I here? That typical, British dismissiveness of the British intellectual class, which they're all a bunch of fucking midwits anyway, fucking limey cocksuckers. But oh God, I hate that guy. I hadn't seen him before. Now I'm like, oh my God, you're a piece of shit. Like, and he was like, well, I don't know if the stable coins meet the definition of money and blah, 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 blah. All this typical, Davosian bullshit. Does it even pass the test for money? And, all that implicit shade throwing. These are just assets that don't mean anything kind of crap. Meanwhile, they have their fingers in the pies of cryptocurrencies that they're trying to push to control and to move their Forex markets, their Forex business into that realm. Oh, Lagarde said yesterday, was asked about exchange rates, and she literally said, I don't look at exchange rates at all. I don't think they matter. I'm like, okay, thank you again for being clear about how dumb you are, or what your agenda is. Not understanding exchange rates and just focusing on inflation is the problem. There's a reason why they target inflation. It's because they want the ability to have complete and utter control over the economy and the tax to spend authority. So, but Bailey said what he said. Lagarde picked up on that and said, look, and this is a moment of honesty from Lagarde. Actually, there were 2 moments of honesty from Lagarde. The first one was, I don't look at exchange rates. Okay. And then she said, look, I view money as a public good, and that we should do everything imaginable at the policy level to fight the rise of private money. Gold, implicitly, gold, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, everything. And she thinks, and this is her mindset, that this is the only way we can have an economy that works for all people. It's all bullshit. But it was very clear what her philosophical stance is and how that translates into policy. And then Powell was asked, well, Chairman Powell, what do you think about this? And he was also asked about the supplemental leverage ratio, and I'll get to that in just a second. That was the first shot. But he was asked, and he said, look, we here in the United States are moving towards having a predictable regulatory framework for these assets. They are a part of the landscape. They are clearly part of the Trump administration's strategy going forward. And we're working with the we're working with the Trump administration now to develop those and guide those regulations. We were frustrated from doing so and developing these regulations under the Biden administration. Said that, by the way. And clearly Powell's stance. Now, remember, in the past, I always said that Powell never had any problem with Bitcoin, but if he had problems with anything, he had problems with stable coins, because he's like, those are synthetic dollars that are not, that, that compete with the dollar. That was 2022, 2023. Then he executed all of the other stable coins. And then the Trump administration comes in and says, we're pursuing a stablecoin strategy to attract capital into the United States, as Vince and I have sussed out in episode 220 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast, and downstream from everything that I talked to Caitlin Long about, and everything that's out there now that we're now familiar with, right? And Powell's all of a sudden like, no, I'm okay with stablecoins. So now, what this tells you is that some of Trump's problems with Powell are real, and some of those problems with Powell are fake. Bloomberg, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, the ECB, everything, they're all in the tank for defending Powell against Trump, because they hate Trump. So now they defend Powell. Powell is now keeping interest rates high, but they also kind of want Powell gone. They're encouraging the fight between Trump and Powell. They just want the fight to continue. It's the same way that they want the Iran-Israel conflict to continue. It's the conflict that they can spin and radicalize people on. And that's how they make their case. And then they swoop in with their version of reality to overlay that over the whole thing. That's the game, folks. That's the Straussian two-step. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. We need a nuclear weapon to defend ourselves. Well, we should have let them enrich uranium well beyond civilian use. Eventually, we're going to have to let them have a nuclear weapon, but only Iran. And then there will be another one, and then there'll be somebody else, and then the fucking nuclear weapons everywhere. No. Same thing here. It's the conflict that they thrive on. Trump knows this. He uses it, and he uses it to his advantage. Powell's not going anywhere. Powell stated yesterday, I have less than 10 months left on my term, and I intend to leave my successor the best economy that I can. That is what my focus is. That's where we are. And we're probably going to cut interest rates later in the year. Now, later could be this month. I think it's going to be this month. The non-farm payroll numbers give us this opportunity. Now, for the massholes, I mean the Thomas Massie fans in the audience and the Rand Paul fans in the audience, by the way, three Republicans voted against the BBB getting out of the Senate, and JD Vance had to cast the tie-breaking vote. Susan Collins, what a shock. Tom Tillis, who's now retiring because he's a completely depreciated asset, and Rand Paul on principle. And the libertarians are all like, yeah, Rand stood up for principle. And Rand's big problem, and this is the interesting part, I saw this morning, Rand would have signed off on the bill had they said that they only, said we're going to raise the debt ceiling by $500 billion as opposed to $5 trillion. So tell me how you're a whore without telling me you're a whore, meaning, at the end of the day, we already established that you're a whore. We're just trying to figure out we're just haggling over price. Like it's the old joke about the ugly guy, the indecent proposal thing, right? The ugly old guy offering the wife, a couple with an attractive young wife, in this case, Robert Redford and Demi Moore, but whatever, $1 million to sleep with the old guy, offering them, the couple, $1 million to sleep with the old guy. And after they talk about it for a little bit, and they're like, yeah, you okay with it? I get $1 million, a lot of money. It's 19. Okay, we'll make it, it's inflation. We'll make it $100 million today. Yeah. Okay. Well, then, once they agree to that, the old guy goes, well, never mind. No, $100 million. Would you take 100? He's like, what do you think I am, a whore? No, we've already established that. Now we're just negotiating on price. So Rand wasn't standing up against the bill on principle because the debt ceiling was being raised. He was angry about the size of the debt ceiling raised because that didn't interface well with his donor base. Now, why do they need, and this is and asking the critical question, why do they need a $5 trillion debt ceiling increase? That's a good question. And I think I have the answer to it. Notice how I didn't say I know that I have the answer to it, that I think I have the answer to it. And I think the answer is quite simple, actually. When you consider everything that Caitlin and Vince and I have been talking about, and the massive opportunity to expand the treasury market through stablecoins, through Tether and everything else, into the unbanked areas of Central America and South America and Africa and whatnot, places where people couldn't be banked. It was too expensive to try and bank these, get these people into banks because they didn't have enough money to get them into banks. But you could get them into, using the dollar in a tokenized way, which is backed mostly by T-bills. So if you're expecting that, and you're expecting a mass, and you're doing away with the supplemental leverage ratio, meaning all of these reserves that are sitting on bank balance sheets now that can be deployed, those assets are going to be deployed, those reserves, that money, they're going to have to be, it's going to also create a massive demand for U.S. treasuries over and above where we are, and over and above the baseline demand that we have today, which looks pretty stable. Net, because, oh, look, every day I wake up and every 15th of the month, I wake up, I look at the TIC report, the TIC report, and I go, oh, look, the amount of reserves held by foreign central banks went up a little bit. Yeah, 1 month it may go down, but for the most part, it goes up every month. There's plenty of demand for U.S. treasuries out there. Trump is remaking the way we handle capital internally. He's raising our credit rating by changing the way we tax and spend, the way we handle capital internally. All of these things, the way we raise revenue through tariffs and excise taxes and investment and everything else. They're raising the debt ceiling because they're anticipating a massive demand for U.S. treasuries. They're anticipating a sovereign debt crisis where everybody else is like, you know what? I don't want to own German bunds. I don't want to own this shit. I want to own the gold standard of sovereign debt. They're setting everything up for a massive influx and demand in U.S. treasuries. And if we have a debt ceiling in place where we're not allowed to issue any more debt, they won't be able to meet that demand. And then what happens? The price on the bonds goes crazy. And they want to do that. And what would happen then? The demand goes crazy. And then we have a huge dislocation in the exchange rate of the dollar. That's part of the reason why the dollar is falling right now. There's an increased demand in treasuries happening, either because other currencies or other economies, investors are bailing out of other people's sovereign debt. moving in the local currencies, which is causing the dollar to fall. That's part of the equation. There's also just an uptick in demand in U.S. treasuries. And in order to buy a treasury, you got to sell dollars. So, if you're expecting an upgrade in demand in U.S. dollars or in U.S. treasuries, and you don't want and you want to keep supply and demand for the other side of the pair, which is the price of a treasury in dollars. Remember, everything's a Forex pair, folks. U.S. Treasury bond, U.S. 10-year bond, QSIP number blah, yield blah, trades at this price in dollars over USD. Everything is a Forex pair. Everything has a denominator. Why is Christine Lagarde an idiot? Because she doesn't look at Forex. So that's why they need a $5 trillion increase in the debt ceiling. And that's why the debt number doesn't actually, in this case, fucking matter. In that respect. Long term, you fix the fiscal deficit, and then you allow the amount of debt that we have out there to be balanced by the demand. Trump and company want a complete reorganization of an unleashing of the housing market. They want an unleashing of investment. All that by getting rid of the SLR, you're now looking at loan growth, which then with that comes treasury demand growth from the G-SIBs and the big banks and the small banks. Like, this is what's coming. You're going to need more dollars. You're going to need more treasuries, at least in the short term. And so when you focus on only one side of the quantity theory of money, the supply, and you miss the demand side, you miss the market. Now ask me if I think it's going to work. That's a good question. It's a high-risk strategy. But how do you ensure that strategy works? What have I been saying for years? What was the fatal flaw of the United States sanctions policy? That it was telling people, fuck you, don't use dollars. Find alternative sources of funding. You're making the dollar, what was the dollar's great advantage? It was convenient and it was cheap, meaning transaction fees were cheap. It was low friction, cheap in the form of low friction to use dollars directly, as opposed to having to convert money around and everything else and pay the fucking City of London shitbags. No. And you put sanctions on, you make the use of dollars, you increase the friction, you increase the cost, and you make it cheaper. You lower the barrier to entry for people to shift off and quote unquote de-dollarize. This was my argument for years. Well, if we're trying to end the use of sanctions and regime change and all this other shit, if the goal is peace, that means that now you're going to lower the demand, to lower that threshold and allow the dollar to be chosen again on a level playing field. So all of these things are working across current with each other. And what's important is to understand that the United States and what Trump is trying to do is to change the way we fund the government so that the American people benefit from government policy and the management of the money supply. Change the nature of the Federal Reserve so they get it out of banking regulation, put that back under the Treasury where it belongs. And I can see the whole thing laying out. It's pretty obvious. They may not pull it off, and certainly they're going to need lower interest rates to affect a lot of this, the moving parts of this plan. So that's why I'm on board with believing that Powell will cut the 3% by the end of the year. And All they's waiting for is the data and for Trump to put some actual honest to God wins on the board. And I think solving 90% solving Israel and Iran in 12 days counts as a win. Remember, all of that investment demand that was coming, that it was pledged to the U.S., was going to cause a massive uptick in dollar demand. And it was going to cause, all of this needs to be done. So we've been gaslit into believing in the end of the United States. I don't believe that needs to happen. Doesn't need to happen. This could be the beginning of the next golden age, not just of the U.S., but for humanity. And I don't believe that the United States, hopefully we'll still be doing this 8, 10, 12 years from now, maybe 15. I was having a discussion yesterday with my daughter about this, and she's particularly hip view of all of it. She just is like, look, in broad strokes, things are going to change. This is the cycle of revolution. And that, well, she used that term. I'm not crazy about the term, but I understood what she was trying to say, which is it's just our time. And, things are going to break up and, there's going to be, and I'm like, yeah, I agree with you. I don't necessarily agree with all of your reasoning as to why, but the broad strokes of it, yeah, we can disagree about the 20%, but we have about 20% disagreement on the mechanisms, but for a 19-year-old, it's just really hip. And she finally just did look at me at one point. And I told her, I said, I was really impressed by all of this. So if you guys think I'm not sleeping well at night because I'm worried about my business or whatever, go fuck yourselves. Like, I sleep like a baby after the 3 or 4, conversations I've had with my daughter recently. I got something stuck in my throat. I'm not crying. And I said, I told her, after listening to her chat about this, and she's still got some misconceptions I got to get rid of. But for the most part, I'm like really impressed with the way you're thinking here, strategically and all of the rest of it. And she smiled for a second, and then she stopped and she went, "Oh, I do listen, Dad." And I take in other sources and I listen to other people, and I don't listen to the same things you do, I don't exist in the same world you do, but I can see a path through both sides. I listen to you and I listen to the other side as well, and I'm like, good. And I keep telling her over and over again, I said, honey, I'm not the guy to build the new system. I'm the guy to tear the old system down and then leave it for the next generations to rebuild. That's my role in this. And I've got some ideas on what to, and how to get us through the transition period. But it's only just to set it up and tee everything up for your generation to figure out how they can actually, build a better life and get out from underneath this neo-feudal debt slavery that fucking bitches like Christine Lagarde want. Fuck that cunt. I want you to have the decision, make the decision easy for you to raise a family, not put it off for so damn long. I want you to be looking forward to that idea, not dreading it. And how are you going to do that? Well, you have to have a house, and you have to have some amount of stability, you have to have all those things. And it's clear that we're fighting people who are now activating every asset they have to try and burn this place to the ground. I tweeted out this morning an article from Zero Hedge, last comment before we go to the charts, about Karen Bass and the LA government running declaring a state of budget emergency because their previous $12.9 billion budget in the city of Los Angeles is $1 billion in debt, and this bitch turned around and proposed a budget of $14 billion. That's not incompetence. That's vandalism. She was put remains in charge to destroy the city of LA. This fucking retarded moron running for the Democratic side in New York is being put there to destroy what's left of New York. These are acts of vandalism, folks. That's where we are. And we can choose how we deal with this stuff. We can choose. Your health is a choice. Your government is a choice. Your friends are choices. How you deal with your family is a choice. Choice is always in front of you. Choose wisely. Gold. Gold had a solid June. The uptrend has been arrested for the short period of time. I like the break of the May high and the very strong continued bottom of the channel with continue to see higher lows. Not we had an April where we didn't see a higher high. We had it through an inside bar. We got an outside bar to the upside in, well, this is May. Sorry, not April. This is April, May, June. Come on, Thomas. 4, 5, 6. We're in month 7. Inside bar here, outside bar to the upside here, even though the price, ultimately hasn't moved, on a monthly closing basis in now over 2 months. And we'll see what happens in July. Is this a coiling pattern to new highs, or are we running out of momentum? Well, we could have a 2 or 3 month downdraft, right? And remember, this is your Q2 bar. And actually, it's just the April bar is the high and the low determine the Q2 high and low. So we could have a move in gold all the way back to there. And on a quarterly basis, we'll throw no reversal signal. So this is the quarterly chart of gold, and it tells us the same story, but with a lot more clarity, meaning we've so far, we've had a little bit of, a little bit of consolidation before we move higher. If Powell cuts rates aggressively into the end of the year, and we're thinking about pursuing a gold-backed treasury strategy, which is starting to hove into view, you don't think gold's going to be $4,000 by this time next year? It's $600 or $700 on 33. It's only 20%. We've moved more than 20% this year. Silver. Monthly chart of silver is very clear. This was a breakout. There's your highs. There's your breakout. There's your close above all of this stuff. Doesn't matter what we're doing here. Doesn't matter that we got burned into the monthly close and closed right at $36. That's only the guys who trade futures every month care about this stuff. Honestly, only guys like Craig Hemke. Look, that's what Craig does for a living. I'm not throwing shade at him, but guys like him, that's who cares about stuff like that. I don't. Monthly chart of silver looks great here. It's been a this is a broad consolidation pattern with an upward bias. And then we just got to break out. Here's your consolidation pattern. Really, you could go all the way back to here. All of this, all the way back to this. And now we got the breakout. Where do you think silver's going? Think it's going back to 28? Looking at the quarterly chart, one of my favorite charts I've ever created. Silver looks good. We're still paying off the breakout from 2020. Double bottom, consolidation, spring, and there's your quarterly chart. Is this volatile? Is it ugly? Is there all sorts of noise in here? Yeah. But at the end of the day, just look at the pattern. Just look at the bars. Look at the bodies of the bars. Everything else, all the other stuff doesn't matter. There we are. Okay. Silver looks good. Moving on. Bitcoin. High monthly closing price from May pays off in June, even though it's an inside bar. Someone's trying to hold it below 110, and they're failing. Bitcoin's going higher. Why? It's part of the U.S. strategy to deal with all the shit I talked about in the opening remarks about stable coins and expanding the treasury market and why we're raising the debt ceiling and everything else. Quarterly chart of Bitcoin. One bar bullish reversal back in 2022 after the only bear market in Bitcoin's history. Bull market since then. On the quarterly basis, this is a triple top with the highest quarterly close in Bitcoin's history right here, just below the previous quarterly highs. If you think we're going back to 10,000, okay. On the other hand, oil is telling us that we're both in an oversupply environment and, energy diversification is real, and China's move towards the EV market is real, and because they need to, and done a wonderful job of demand destruction here in the United States. Okay, maybe. We'll see. But as of right now, oil's holding between $60 and $70 a barrel. This is what happens when you have a 12-day war. But we've opened up July, and we're pushing back towards the $68 overhead resistance. Breaking through that, we'll go back into the 70s. And I think oil will hold between $70 and $75 a barrel. Simply on demand pull alone, or, demand pull alone will push oil into the 70s, I think. Okay. Quarterly chart, however, is still bearish. This is the lowest quarterly close in quite a long time in oil. This is only a 3.5-year chart because, everything else is it's crazy with COVID and the war. And I wanted to cut all that stuff out. I wanted to cut out the extreme highs and lows on the chart just to focus on where we are. This is clearly, the lowest quarterly close going back to COVID. So this is going to be a pivotal quarter for oil as to whether or not this double bottom holds or not. Okay. If we got to return back to $58 a barrel, we could be going to 35. But I'm having a hard time believing that. Because we're either looking at war or we're looking at, growth. And growth will take oil higher. Okay. So for futures market is now handicapping 3 rate cuts this year, pushing towards 4. US dollar is holding around 97. The euro looks like it's topping. Certainly today, especially with the non-farm payroll numbers coming out of the United States. What's more important is bond yields and the bond spreads, which are clearly rolling over. The U.S.-German 10-year spread is down to 168. Interestingly enough, actually, I don't think I updated this number from Sunday. There was a big blowout in the U.S. Treasury gilt spread this morning by 18 basis points this morning. The gilt market was getting killed. And it was a big rollover in both the pound, which was down to 136, and the euro, which was trading above 118. But the pound was over 137 yesterday. And it's back down, and now it's threatening to roll over at 130, below 136. So what we're seeing now is there's the dollar is beginning to firm, right? And again, the Hong Kong dollar is still pegged under the upside. Like, all that's still in play. So while there's been a big downdraft in the dollar, I think that's been policy. And I think we're stuffing the euro down their throats. But if these spreads continue to, move in the Americans' direction, does anything else really matter? Everything else is just a rearguard action trying to hold everything together. US 210 spread is still over 50 basis points. The 10-year JGB has sold off, hitting a low of like 136, 137, 135, 136 basis points. It's now back to 145. Copper is breaking out. We're going to talk about that. And gasoline futures are holding at around 210 a gallon. I threw up the copper quarterly chart to remind everybody of what happened in Q4 of last year and Q1 of this year, and now Q2. Copper's pretty much done with $4 a pound. If everybody wants to build nuclear power plants and everybody wants to upgrade their electricity grids and move to EVs and or hybrids and blah, 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 well, I got news for you. We're going to need a fuckload more copper than we have right now. To remind everybody, the United States, right on schedule, by the way, began lifting sanctions on Russia. Back at Cornerstone, I was told by somebody that that the Trump administration was targeting July 1st to begin the process of removing sanctions on Russia. On 6/27, Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szarcho, I have no idea how to pronounce his name. And I know it's been told to me before, announced that, the U.S. had lifted sanctions on Rosatom and the Russian banks they're dealing with in order to get their nuclear power plant that they've contracted built. That became a full-on executive order on the 30th. Broadly, only for civilian nuclear project development. Those sanctions have been lifted. They were put in place by Biden. They've been lifted by Trump. The process has begun. Civilian nuclear worldwide is now the shift. We are shifting away from nuclear bombs to nuclear power plants. That's where we're going. That's what's happening. And everybody who's still arguing we need to extend the nuclear weapons age into the 22nd century can literally go fuck themselves. Okay? So let's just leave it at that. Trump's tariffs. We're already seeing massive tariff revenue. So I think the announcement this month was $27 billion in tariff revenue in June, over May's $22 billion. And that's only with the baseline tariff. That's with a lot of the new tariffs having been waived to negotiate trade deals. Everybody who doesn't negotiate a trade deal, all of those, and that's also not including anything from China, who have now agreed to the new tariff rules. We have no idea how much that's going to start bringing in. And now that that's been mostly finalized, and the moratorium on the tariff schedule ends on July 9th. And I haven't heard one thing about the European Union sitting down to negotiate with Trump yet. And it's the 2nd, folks. They've got a week. So, let's see how this plays out. Okay. Personally, what I'm getting at here is, and I can't see the whole trade. I can only see like, it's a probability cloud. It's like there's all this stuff is just kind of swirling in front of me, and I can't like connect all the dots and make a mechanism for it, but I can see it. These are the conditions for sovereign debt crisis in Europe. Okay. The European Union continues to put sanctions on Russia's gas flow into Europe. They keep doubling down on that which has not worked. Is it incompetence or is it vandalism? I think it's a bit of both. Clearly, it's incompetence on the part of Lagarde, but, what are you going to do with that? So, okay, the Dow. Just in case anybody is confused about, the importance of this bar, I made it abundantly clear. I hope you can see that. That's to tweak the people in the audience. Oh, by the way, that's kind of important. Here's the Dow. Here's your double top. Here's your potential 2-bar reversal. Right? We closed here. To end the uptrend, we would have to close below that low right there. We had a move down to 36 on the tariff tantrum in Q2 and the beginning to start Q2. And by the end of Q2, we closed here. Triple top now begins to form at 45,000. What's the rule about triple tops? They're made to be broken. Same thing with triple bottoms. So the uptrend from a quarterly perspective on the Dow is intact. On the monthly chart, it's very, very clear. We had a 2-bar monthly reversal in June off of this downtrend. Note also, ignore all the tails, folks. Ignore all the volatility. Just look at the situation. Here is the end of your uptrend. Here's your last bar in your uptrend. And we avoided the 2-bar reversal right here. Yeah, we got the 3-bar reversal. And guess what happened to the 3-bar reversal? It got reversed. What do I always say about 3-bar reversals? They're not reversals. They're coin flips. Half the time they continue the new trend, and half the time, well, they don't, and they get reversed. It's been reversed. Now we've got a potential breaking of the previous high in the Dow. Okay. For Q2, the Dow was up 4.5%. European markets were off. The NASDAQ and the Nikkei and emerging markets slightly outperformed the Dow. For June. For Q2, the Dow was up 5%. After all of this bullshit, it's up 5%. The Euro Stoxx 50 was only up 1%. The DAX was up almost 8% because where else is European money going to go? The NASDAQ, the Nikkei, both up strong. Emerging markets still up strong. The Dow is closing the gap on all of these indices except for the DAX because, again, where is the money going to go? Dow for 2025 is up 3.5%. The NASDAQ's up 8%. The Euro Stoxx 50 is up 9%. The Nikkei is only up 1%. Emerging markets are up 15%. We're running out of that. This trend is just about played out. I think we're going to have a similar outperformance by the Dow on the second half of 2025. We've got Build Back Betters through the Senate. It's going to go back to the House. Stephen Miller was out last night saying, look, the Senate bill is even better than the House bill. It cuts even more spending. So Elon Musk is full of shit. And as Ian Burlingame noted about round 3 of the Trump-Musk dust-up, loyalty tests are not about the people that are involved in the conflict. It's about the people who decide which side of the aisle they're going to be on. The most encouraging thing I've seen so far, and here's the gig, here's the funny part. Marjorie Taylor Greene, someone who I have lambasted here in the past, surprised me this week. Her loyalty's been tested. She came out smelling like a rose because she introduced legislation to redo the census, the 2020 census, and have it redone in time for the midterms to get rid of all the illegal aliens and the migrants and the immigrants off the voter rolls, off the census, and do reapportionment. By the midterms. Trump is backing this plan. They want it to happen. That would be hilarious. So kudos to MTG for that one. I'm happy to report that maybe she's not AOC for rednecks. Or she was, and she got religion real quick when she realized there's a new sheriff in town. And his name is Don Trump-Leone. That's what I've got for you this morning. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.